For today's lesson, we are going to explore some breadboard circuitry. So what is a breadboard? These are breadboards. We have a few different versions of them. This is called a full breadboard, a half breadboard, and then this is also a mini breadboard. And this is actually what we're going to be using for our houses that we're going to be wiring up shortly, but it's easier for us to learn on these. We're actually going to use the half-size breadboard. And breadboard wiring is something that is typically used in basic circuitry prototyping. So before we develop something like a computer board, we test out a circuit to make sure that everything is actually working properly before we pay a lot of money or we put a lot of effort into something that's a little bit more elaborate. So we have a lot of different components with us for today's lesson. All these things here. I'm going to do my very best to show you on the camera. The lighting is not great. It's actually intentionally a little bit dark because when it was very, very bright, it was even harder to see. But I'll walk you through it, and I'm going to talk you through a lot of things. Now, these positions where you put things on this breadboard is going to be very, very specific in order to get your circuit to work. So make sure you're paying close attention. I'm going to intentionally build in some pauses to give you some time to go ahead and wire these up. Always remember that if you get stuck or you need to see something again, you always have the option to pause the video. I know we don't love to pause the video because we want to just work through it and get it done. Pause the video and rewatch it. Before we do get started, a couple things about this breadboard. All breadboards, in fact, that we have here in the classroom. On the back side, this is a peel-off backing that there's like a foam sticker underneath it. Please, 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 please do not remove that, okay? Don't even pick at it because we're fidgety. Please just leave that the way that it is so that way we can continue to reuse these boards. When we get into doing our house circuit, we in fact will peel this off so we can stick it. That way you can have this for your house. The other thing about these, you notice the difference between these two here. Something you will notice, especially by looking at this in front of you, might be harder to see on camera, are these outer two rows. We have a red, I don't know why I just did balloons. We have a red, we have a blue here strip. Okay, colors might be hard to see, but you can see it in front of you. These will in fact come off of the center part and leave it somewhat like this. Please also do not bend this or pop these out. Here's what might happen, and I've had this happen. When you pop these out, there are connection points that are underneath here that might pull out and they might actually break. And when you try to snap it back together, they aren't lined up properly, which makes the breadboard in that position useless. So please refrain from peeling off the backing as well as separating these sides from the center. Let's get building to learn a little bit about breadboard circuitry, and we're going to play around a little bit. Your exit ticket today is going to be a question. You're not going to do any pictures or any screenshots. In fact, all these components here we're going to put into a bag that has your name on it. That way we can use them for your house. I'm going to take these back, but this stuff is all for you to take and play with. So the more knowledgeable that you are with this, as we build it into the house, it will be much easier, obviously. And then if there are certain things components that we don't use in the house that you, in fact, just kind of want to play with after the fact or put into your house after we're done with the activity, that's completely fine too. So I'm going to slide some of these things, actually all these things out of the way. And we're just going to grab the pieces that we need one at a time. The first thing that we have, this right here, this is our battery holder. And you notice that we have red and we have black. You may also notice that there is a little off and on switch built into it, which is great. I'm so happy about that. That way we can shut off the power to our whole circuit, or our house for that matter. But this part is probably going to be one of the more frustrating things for today because, believe it or not, one of the easiest tasks I'm asking you to do is probably going to be one of the more frustrating. what you need to do is you need to open up this part here like that. That wasn't too hard. Okay, sometimes it might be difficult to pop open. And we need to make sure that we are putting our battery in correctly. So when we did scrappy circuits, we talked about how the top where the lettering is, let me see if I can get it, might be harder to see on the video, but the top part right in the middle, there's a plus sign. And on the back side, this would be the minus or the negative. This is a direct current. All batteries have direct current. Alternating current is a type of electricity that exists in the wall. It's called alternating current because electricity kind of, I wouldn't say it does flow in different directions, but it more so kind of like shakes the power. It's not like it says, I'm going to go this way, and then I'm going to go this way. That's not really how that works. But it's a direct current. So we have the positive and we have the negative. When you put this in, if you even look in the bottom of your battery, we have a negative. It's stamped into the bottom here. It's a negative. I don't see a positive on the top, but we're going to put it in so it's face up like that. And then we snap that closed. Okay. Now we have this wiring. And this is why these breadboards are a little easier to learn and use as opposed to these mini ones. Because these ones here along the side, you see how we have a positive and negative on either side. When I plug this red wire, I want to plug it into one of the red rails. And the wires on these can be a little bit flimsy, but we have them, I soldered them so that way it can be a little bit stiffer. So try to push those straight down and see if you can get them to bite in those spots. You might have to push them down. I would hold it close to the tip of the wire and slide them in like that. Now, when we turn on our battery, what we have done, we have 3 volts of power in this battery. We're now supplying 3 volts of power down these rails. So what, in fact, this breadboard does is it distributes all the electricity to make it more usable. So rather than having one little wire that has 3 positive volts of electricity and then we have the negative, now anytime that we plug a jumper wire into those rows, we now actually have access to that power. Let me give you an example. We've talked about these before. We did these with scrappy circuits. This is an LED, and I'm showing you up close because we need to pay attention to the fact that one of the legs of this is longer. That's called the anode, and you don't need to know that. That's a little nerdy word. That's called the anode. But what you do need to know is that the longer leg is going to be your positive, and your shorter leg is negative. That's very important. These are called an LED, which means light emitting diode. And a diode means electricity can only flow in one direction. So if you have this backwards, it won't work. In this circuit, it just simply won't turn on. If you were to, in some circuits, let's say apply more voltage to it in the wrong direction, in fact, it would burn up the diode. It would short the diode and not make it work. So we have the long one, the anode, which is the positive, and we have the shorter one, which is the cathode, which is negative. So let me show you something real quick, and then we're going to get a little bit better on wiring than just doing something simple like this. But I have my positive leg here, and I have my negative leg. And if I were to just simply plug those in, hard to see, gets super bright for the camera. There we go. Okay, I have my light turns on. And I want you to do that first before we explore any more wiring on the breadboard. For the main reason is I want to make sure that we have a good connection point here. If you were to move this around a little bit and these wires, and you notice, see how it's flicking on and off? It's probably because you don't have a great connection with your battery wires. So we want to try to get those a little bit tighter there. All right, so my LED, it's super bright on the camera. It's actually not that bright here, but it's just how it's being seen in the camera. So we know our battery is working and we know our LED is working. So I want you to unplug your LED. And we're going to explore a little bit of breadboard wiring to understand how electricity will flow through these. So right now, the only thing that we have electricity flowing through, we have a positive going down this red rail and we have a negative going down this blue rail. Now when I plug this in, here's my LED again, I'm going to take the longer leg and I'm just going to simply have that one be higher on the breadboard. I'm going to turn it sideways and I'll show you here in a second what I mean. Okay, so I have a pin here and I have a pin here. Okay, so it's sideways in the breadboard. There you go, there's a good view. You can see it there. Okay, but this one right here is my positive. This one is my negative. Now, it doesn't matter what color wires that you use or you grabbed to start. The color wires doesn't really matter. Sometimes people will use them just more so for reference. So for today's example, I'm going to use to start, I'm going to use red and black just so you can see and I can do a better job explaining, but any color wires will work. It doesn't make a difference what color. So I mentioned probably multiple times now, I'll mention it again, this red rail here has the positive charge. So I'm going to take my jumper wire and I can plug it anywhere on that red rail. It doesn't matter where, but for the sake of this, I'm going to plug it into the top, near the top, so it's on the red rail. I'm going to take my black wire and I'm going to plug it into the blue rail. I got to be honest with you guys. It's kind of annoying that this negative is blue because typically the standard is red and black, not red, and it's kind of even pinkish and blue. But now that we have that, I need to now, so the electricity on these side rails flows this direction. The electricity in the middle of the breadboard flows this direction, but it does not cross this middle line here. So I have my leg plugged in here. On mine, it's in row 11. I can see it's in row 11. So if I plug this red, I can plug it anywhere into row 11. And I can plug my black wire into, it looks like my shorter leg, the cathode, is in row 12. I'll even plug it in on this side of the LED. It doesn't matter. When I plug that in, my LED lights up again. That's super fun. So I have my red and my black. Once you get that done, if you're having trouble with that, check with your neighbor. If you're still having trouble with that, let me know and I'll be around. You see as I move this around, it turns on and off. It's because I have a bad connection right here with my battery pack. Maybe in the future, Mr. Hale can purchase some better battery packs, but this will work. We'll get by. So there's that. Now, we have a couple other things in our kit that we're going to explore. So this is an output. An LED is an output, meaning it's showing you something. It's doing something that we can see. Okay, another example in our kit, we have these. This is actually a buzzer. It's called a piezo buzzer, an active buzzer. And we'll do this shortly. This is also an output because it does something that we can either see, in this case we can hear. We're going to play with some inputs first. So I want you to leave your wiring with your LED where it is. It's going to be pretty important that we're making sure that we're doing these next steps properly. And now we're going to explore an example of an input. The easiest example that I have is this tiny little button here. And that tiny little button has two little legs coming off the bottom of it. So I want you to keep your overall wiring where it is. But what I need you to do is this. I want you to unplug the red wire that is feeding the LED. I want you to take this button and I want you to take one of the legs and I want you to plug it back into the same row where that wire was. So that's, it was 11. And I want you to make it so that it's going, let's see if we can see here. Row 11. And in my case, when I plug it back into row 11, the other, so there's a pin here in row 11. The pin that's in this one is in row 9. So if I were to push this button, nothing happens because we don't have a full circuit. There's no power coming from the positive. But I'm going to now plug this into row 9. When I plug this into row 9, we still don't have any power. That's because this switch right here is open, meaning it's not touching, not closed. We need to close the switch to turn it on. Look at that. How fancy, Mr. Hale. I bet you guys are pumped about this. So once again, just so you guys can understand how this is flowing through the breadboard, because if we can understand this basic understanding of how the breadboard is laid out, the rest of the stuff is going to be much, much easier. So we have the button feeding the longer leg. It's in the same row this way, not a column. It's in the same row this way. And then we have this jumper wire feeding the other side of the button. So the electricity is going positive through the top side of that button. It's stopping right now, but now it can flow through, out the other side of the button, through the anode, the positive leg, through the LED, back out this jumper wire to the negative, and then back up that rail to the battery pack. So that's the flow of electricity. Let's try another one. Let's leave this wiring where it is. So I'm in 11 and 9. I'm not sure what pins you're in. You might be in the same ones, but I'm just going to make that a reference in my head. So I have 11 and 9. I'm going to take this guy out. And this thing right here is pretty fancy. Okay, this one here looks like this, has some long legs on it. It has like a little zigzag on the top. Okay, so I'm going to plug these, each leg, one into 11 and one into 9. All right. And once I plug that in, you're going to notice that your LED should light back up. This right here is called a photosensor, which is actually not like photo, like take pictures, but it's a light sensor. So I don't have great lighting right here, but you can see, and let's see if I can get it to actually work well enough, but you guys will be able to do this in the classroom. How these things work, which is pretty neat. The less light that it has, it will slow down the flow of electricity. It's a resistor, essentially. The more light that it has, the faster electricity can flow through it. So if I were to put my finger over it, it might be hard to see. Yeah, you can see it in the video. If I put my finger over it and I have less light going through, that LED becomes dim. If I have a bright light in here, it'll actually get much, much brighter. So this little sensor here is actually what you have in the night light in your hallway or in your bedroom, that when you turn off the lights, that little sensor says, hey, I'm below a certain threshold of light. I want you to turn on the night light. So there's a little bit more happening there in your night light than just this, because this is actually doing the opposite. Okay, it's slowing down the flow of electricity. It's making it so that's dim. Okay, so there's a little computer board in your night light that it says, hey, when it's below a certain threshold, I want you to kick on the light. But this is a photosensor, which is pretty neat. And that's a resistor. Okay, let's unplug this one. So now we've done a photosensor, which is an input. Okay, it's controlling the output, which is the LED in this case. We've done a button. Now this is a temporary switch, meaning it's only working when I'm pushing it and I'm letting go. We have a teeny little slide switch here. Teeny little slide switch. Okay? And you might notice that this has 3 prongs on it. So to this point in the video, I have given you like step-by-step instructions on how to create this. I want you to try to figure out how can you get this light to light up using this slide switch here, like this. So I want you to put this in the breadboard. Okay, I'm going to slide it off screen and I'm going to do it. I want you to put this in your breadboard. Pause the video right now. Now's a good time to pause it. And try to get this to turn on and turn off with this switch. So go ahead and do that right now. Hopefully we got it. I got it here. So what we may have noticed on our slide switch, I put it right next to it. I could slide it over, but it's fine there. We need to have one wire go through the middle pin and the other wire go through the pin where that switch is, so where the LED is. Okay? So when I slide this on, this is an on switch or an off switch here. That's cool. Let's do a couple more. We have 2 more things here that I want you to explore and play with. We have a knob here. The nerdy term for this is a potentiometer. Think of this as your dimmer switch, and that's how we're going to use it. So now that we know how to use that slide switch, that's going to be a little bit of a hint maybe on how we can connect this together. So let's explore and try a couple things first. With this, you're not going to burn it out. You're not going to break it. So let's just practice exploring getting this to work. You should be able to figure out at this point. If you have trouble, I'll come around and help you out. But let's get used to trying things before just raising our hand and saying, Mr. Hale, I don't know how to do this. Come do this for me. That's not really my nature. Let me plug this guy in here. Let's see. I'm in 11. It looks like the other pins are going into 9 and 7. So let's try plugging into 9 and 7. Oh. Well, that really doesn't do much of anything. That's kind of interesting. Let's plug it into this one. Oh, look at that. That's kind of fancy. So see if you can get that potentiometer to work properly. Brighten and dim as you turn the knob. It's going to be very similar. I'm going to help you out here a little bit to the wiring of this. Okay, so we're going to use the middle pin and we're going to use one of the outer pins. In this circuit, we don't need to necessarily use all 3 pins. If you were using this potentiometer in a circuit that used a computer board, you would use the other pin. One of them is called the drain, and it just basically tells it how much electricity is going through. It's actually communicating how much electricity is flowing through, so you can tell it to do certain things. There's our dimmer switch. All right, our last thing that we're going to explore today, and then if you want to play around with these a little bit, you can't actually, with what we have with this battery pack, you can't actually burn it up or ruin it. So if you want to go ahead and explore this breadboard when you're done, that would be awesome. So I mentioned, so this is another input. LED is an output. Okay, so here's my output. Here's my other output. This is a buzzer, or we can say it's a speaker. It's called a piezo. That's kind of a nerdy word. When we look at it up close, there's a positive sign on one side. I may also notice, just like my LED, that one of these legs, probably hard to see in the video, one of these legs is longer. There you go. One of these legs is longer than the other. So that's going to be my positive. That's my anode. It's important that we plug these in. Another thing that's kind of nerdy terminology with Mr. Hale. These are called polarized, which means electricity only flows in one direction. Okay? So we have our positive and we have our last one. I might have to move the breadboard around a little bit in order to get this to fit properly. But the longer leg needs to be on this side of the circuit and the negative on this side. So I'm going to unplug my black wire. Let me unplug it completely. And my long leg in this circuit, I'm going to have it feed or be plugged into the same row. In this case, it was 11 as my LED. I'll just push it down in there and you'll feel it bite. Now, it's kind of hard to see underneath where the other pin is plugged into. Now, I know that I put that in 11 when I shoved it in there, but before you push it down all the way, see where that shorter leg is getting plugged in on your breadboard. On mine, I can see that it's going into 14. So I have 11 for the positive. I'm going to put 14 for the black wire. And again, you can plug this into any of these pins. This whole rail is being fed by that black wire. So when I plug this in, you may or may not be able to hear it in the video. I have a little buzzer that's buzzing. Let me get my good wiring here off my battery. So you guys can hear it. My battery's coming undone a little bit. All right, here we go. I'm out of the camera view. Well, that's fun. That should be fun in class with 29 of you doing that. All right, so that's the buzzer. That's a little bit of a buzzer. And what's actually making that happen? The electricity is going through two little metal flaps that are actually vibrating against each other. That's what's creating that squealing sound. After you get that, here's your final challenge to be done for the day. I'm going to unplug that. Just unplug any of these circuits. Your challenge that I want you to try to do. So we have our potentiometer knob, input. We have an output. I also want you to add another output. So essentially, this needs to be in this circuit also. So your LED and your buzzer will both go off at the same time. So what can happen is the electricity is flowing through positive, through the potentiometer, through the positive side of this, out the negative side, and then it can go into the positive side of the LED. And then the negative side of the LED is coming this way. So when I say that the negative side of this buzzer, it doesn't actually make the electricity negative. It just means that the electricity is flowing through in that direction. So see if you can get this potentiometer to get your buzzer to buzz as well as an LED. I'm going to open up the exit ticket near the end of class. You should, if you completed these steps with me, you should have a pretty good understanding of the question for the exit ticket.